1, 0, go. It's Mazzy, and we're recording. And I am on the West Coast. It's the morning here. I'm speaking with John, without an H, Digital Gramophone, my arch nemesis from North Carolina.
Yeah.
Welcome, John.
Hey, how's it going?
God, that's so polite. Come on.
I just, I can't help it when I get
just
on
woke
these.
up, not you.
Well, I know, and when I get on these, a lot of people said after our first one that they're like, John is so there were people making comments about how different I was, and it's like, well, I'm talking to somebody and not just my phone, so I'm
well,
sure
just
that
ignore
makes
me
a
for
difference.
the next 45 minutes to an hour and just do your own thing. Let's make it. I want to do a conceptual video. You know how I like conceptual and avant-garde.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about two completely different things and talk almost at the same time and show shit and have no concept. I wanted to try to do that when I did it with a local bandography, Dave. We did one on Out There Records. I think, Dave, if you're watching, I think you got a little upset that I would choose you to do one on weird and out there records, but I've discovered some great stuff like that from you. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Let me tell everyone what we're doing here.
Okay.
Sophomore. For me, that was, and for both of us, that was 10th grade. We were sophomores in 10th grade.
Yeah.
But we're talking about sophomore albums by artists, their second album. A lot of times the cliche is all these artists and writers would save the great stuff because they never made a record and all the good shit was on the first record. And the second record, it was, a mountain climb to get some good second records. So we're going to show 10 or so of 10 sophomore records that we each like. We didn't tell each other which ones we would pick. In my case, I don't know, and John, and he'll talk about this since he's the visiting team, he'll go first, but I decided to not do any of the cliche, and cliche is a good thing, considered the best, Led Zeppelin 2, the second Doors record, even Warren Zevon's Excitable Boy.
Yeah.
I just did not pick those amazing second records by artists that you see, Stooges, Funhouse, and I picked, you'll know these artists. I think one would be on one of those lists of the best second records ever. So without further ado, John, if you have a little intro about what you're going to show, and then.
Well, so I think it's important to mention why we did, because we've been talking about doing a second collab video for a while.
This is our sophomore video.
And that's why. I mean, you that was your idea because it was the second one, and you expect me to fail miserably, have a sophomore slump here. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah. But that's the idea.
So you're in Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
Are you right in Charlotte?
Mm-hmm.
One of those people, whenever I used to fly home to San Francisco, in the last 10 minutes before you land, you finally talk to the person sitting next to you. And they say, so where are you from? And I'd say San Francisco. They said, me too. I said, where do you live? And they go, oh, I live in Walnut Creek. And no offense to Walnut Creek. They don't fucking live in San Francisco. They live in the suburbs.
Again, we have surrounding suburbs, but but I'm a Charlotte address. I'm pretty close to the outskirts, but
and I don't mean that as a snooty thing to people. But it's just,
I'm thinking every day. I'm thinking more and more about moving out to the country. And if I had no obligations, I'd be moving to Canada. So
they won't let us in for now. I'm only 2.5 hours, 3 hours from Canada, but we can't.
Yeah. One of my best friends is married to a Canadian citizen, and they're moving to Canada.
Yeah, some of my favorite vinyl community members are up in Canada. I'm not going to do shout out, so Canada, sorry. You know who you are.
You're right.
All right. Sophomore record.
Speaking of Canada, I'll just start. My first sophomore record is by a band that's based out of Canada. They're not all Canadian, but it's Arcade Fire's second album, Neon Bible. And the reason why I chose this one was because for kind of what you were alluding to, is a lot of times a debut comes out and it's so amazing, and people kind of think there's just no way that they're going to be able to top that first album. And this one doesn't top.
Suburbs was third or what? Or first?
Suburbs was the third one. Right. Neon Bible was the second, and Funeral was the first.
Okay.
And this one doesn't top Funeral by any means. I still think Funeral is their best album,
I love
but
Suburbs. Yeah.
yeah, this was a amazing, still amazing album, and did not disappoint at all. It's a little, I think, a little darker than Funeral. Just in its sound, sonically, it's a little bit more goth, kind of in a way. There's like a goth influence in a lot of it, but there's still a lot of the same sounds. And I think that they got really where that first album was very personal. This one got a little bit more socio-political in a lot of the commentary. But I still think it's an amazing album. I think their first three albums are outstanding, but I've
I only
kind of
have that
fallen out
on.
of love with them recently.
Yeah.
Just don't feel the same way about them that I once did.
I have that album only on compact disc. I don't have vinyl, and I haven't listened to it in a while, to be honest with you. But I liked it
Yeah.
a lot. But what I remember about it, and tell me if I'm imagining this, it seems there's a lot of heavy church organ on it.
There is, well,
That one track.
in one track in particular,
That's what I
the final
remember.
track, "My Body Is a Cage,"
That's right.
is woo. But that's such a powerful song, though.
And let's throw out a shout out right here to Bill the Vinyl Verse, because Peter Gabriel covers that song.
Oh, really? I've never heard his.
He has an album. I only have the CD of that too. He has an album of these covers, and he does them completely different. And he does "My Body Is a Cage."
There was a really good fan made video for that album that was like the final scene in Once Upon a Time in the West. You know, it had a young Charles Bronson. You remember that?
Yeah,
that movie?
it's a.
And was it Peter Fonda? I think was or Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda. His dad.
It's Sergio Leone. Yeah.
Yes. There's a really good fan made video using that song, and it's that final kind of standoff scene at the end.
Very nice.
And the band even endorsed it. Like they kind of kept it from getting killed by copyright law because the band thought it was so great. They kind of embraced it and paid. Yeah, it's great. Cool. But anyway.
Okay, I'm starting out my favorite band in the world, but going against the way they planned it, because this is not the second album they made, but this is the second album that came out in America on their main label. Now you could quibble about, introducing the Beatles on this album and what's on a different VJ Records and all that bullshit. But of course, Capitol Records did their own hybrids of their records up until Sgt. Pepper, and the Beatles' second album. It's called the Beatles' second album, so I can fucking include this because it's their second album as a kid that I bought. This is a mono copy, and the reason I want to include this because this is the best rock and roll record the Beatles ever made. Pure rock and roll in this format. Obviously, it's different and configuration of what they put out. And to back me up, the great rock critic for Rolling Stone, and he had his Rock and Roll Confidential newsletter, and then Rock and Rap was Dave Marsh. He did an entire fucking book, the Beatles' second album, where it's like an essay. It's a little book. You can read it in one evening or one Saturday morning. It's called The Beatles' Second Album. And I'm just going to read the beginning here. The Beatles' second album runs only 22 minutes with just 11 songs, many of which the group didn't write. Despite that, the album personifies the Beatles, the world's greatest rock and roll band, according to rock and roll critic and author Dave Marsh. With its overload of rock and roll, R&B, and early soul influence, including rock and roll over Beethoven, Long Tall Sally, the Beatles' second album offers a great vantage point from which to see the group's enormous impact on pop music and culture. It's a fucking rock and roll gem. It's just, please, Mr. Postman, Money, Devil in Your Heart, You Really Got a Hold on Me. I mean, John Lennon doing, Smokey Robinson and just making it his. Who would have thought this white guy from Liverpool would cover these things? And so, not a conventional, when you talk about sophomore albums, not as the Beatles made it, but this album is great. And of course, the cover's been parodied many times, including there's a Yola Tango record that kind of takes over this cover too. So I'm starting out right out of the gate with the Fab Four. Some say the Rolling Stones were the greatest rock and roll band. They were. by default. The Beatles split up. Have at it, Mick.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I've always found it funny how
True, because
people.
I say it's true.
Yeah, well, of course. But like, I've always kind of found it funny how there are people that are very much like, no, the Beatles were a pop band, and they weren't a rock band. It's such malarkey. They were inspired by rock and roll, by the roots of rock and roll. Like, it's such a joke.
Those early Hamburg days and all the Cavern days, they had to play loud and rock. I mean, they played their softer things, but not really. And John was a screamer early on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Paul, I mean, God,
Even
Paul,
Paul.
Little Richard, who could sing like that? I just listened to an older interview with Dylan. I'm in a Dylan phase again every so often. And he's talking about, this is probably 15, 20 years ago, the interview. And they're talking about the Beatles and his relationship with George Harrison because of the Wilburys. And he talks about, John Lennon's rock and roll voice. That guy was a singer. In fact, those two guys, he goes, Paul McCartney, I'm in awe of that. I don't know how he does it. And he keeps doing it. And he sings it and he writes and he just throws these rock and roll ballads and rock and roll songs and these ballads and whatever you say, he just keeps doing it. He makes it look so easy. I'm in awe of that man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it says it all. Okay, so segueing from the Beatles into like this is just there's no good way to do any segues for this. But I'm gonna stick with the same theme of the previous one that I showed, which is again another fantastic debut that I still think is that band's best record, but the follow-up is spectacular and not a letdown. I'm kind of here to prove that the sophomore slump is really a non-existent.
Fiction.
I mean, it's not non-existent. It's just not as prominent in music as a lot of people think. It's more of an athletic thing, I think. It's more like with athletes, sophomore slump. But like in music, I don't think it's as prominent as a lot of people think. In fact, a lot of my favorite albums are the second albums by bands. But this one isn't my favorite by this band, but it's still damn good. And it's Room on Fire by The Strokes. I'm also showing this as kind of a little joke. And people that have watched your videos will know why I'm showing this. But The Strokes.
I've never had a stroke.
The Strokes. No, it's not. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But this was Room on Fire, which came out in 2003. Following their first album, so this is it. And this is kind of, I think, a lot of people would say more of the same, as the first album. And for a lot of people, that's a letdown. Whoa.
Sorry.
Woo. You okay? You need a minute?
Oh. I need my mask. I need to wash my
hands.
Yeah,
I was about to say. I hope you don't have to get tested. All right. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people would consider this kind of more of the same, I think. And I don't think that's a bad thing in this case. And this album is just as good. They improve on some things. Like kind of the riffs are a little bit more inventive on this album. And I think the song Reptilia is actually probably my favorite Strokes song, the second song on this album. And then that was the third album for me that that's where I left them pretty much until
I like their new record actually.
Yeah, the new one's really good. The new one's great.
And I love the John the Biscuit art cover.
Yeah. No, the new album is fantastic.
Yeah.
The ones between this one and the new one, I'm just not a fan of at all.
It's interesting. When you were saying that, I thought of other albums were popping in my head, which I'm not showing now, but there's a concept that I don't know how you would explain it, but are records, they're not really sophomore records, but records that came out after an artist has some friggin' humongous record.
Yeah.
For instance, like Frampton Comes Alive. I love his albums before that, Frampton's Camel and those albums. I was at the show, that Winterland show, they recorded that, and I worked in stores then, so that record was so big that after a while I couldn't even listen to it. It's one of the, that, Eagles, California, Rumors, Fleetwood Mac, that period humongous. And then after that, he puts out "I'm in You," and like, oh my god!
Yeah.
And he's in a hot
Yeah.
tub with I don't know, somebody in a movie or something. What's her name? Anyway,
Right.
this has become. I see this is going in a generational way, obviously. And that's
I've got
okay.
some older ones, but I feel compelled to talk about
No,
newer music.
yeah, I
Like,
think I don't know if I do this time, but that's okay because as you know, I listen to a lot of new music too. So, but
yeah, I
my
know.
next
Yeah.
choice is a British band. I think I could have included this when I did my perfect album video a while back. But again, sometimes I get comments, people saying, "Oh, that's not the most perfect." I tend to do these like this. These aren't the top 10 best sophomore records, although I think this one is, and it's not on a lot of lists. This is to me one of my personally perfect records, that self-titled Traffic
Oh
record.
yeah. Yeah.
The first album in America called Mr. Fantasy, amazing record. I really missed that after this, that Dave Mason left the band because I think he added something with Steve Winwood, uh, you know, uh, Chris Wood on flute and saxophone reeds,
Mm-hmm.
and
Jim Capaldi.
Jim Capaldi, of course, a
Yeah.
great percussionist and a great
Yeah.
vocalist in his own right.
Yeah.
This every single song on this from it's the irony is that side one and side two both start out with Dave Mason songs. You Can All Join In, and Vagabond Virgin, which was actually co-written with Capaldi and very percussive in that kind of way. But Pearly Queen and Feeling All Right became a huge Dave Mason song, like with Joe Cocker and so many other people have covered that. Great album. I just love this record. I mean, it's almost like if the band was a British band, the band.
Yeah.
It's got Americana roots and folk roots, a little bit of psychedelic, not as much. The first album had more psychedelic. It's a very soulful album because Steve Winwood's one of the greatest blue-eyed soul singers, around. And he was so young when he was singing with the Spencer Davis group, "I'm a Man and Give Me Some Lovin'." But I think this is a perfect sophomore record.
Yeah. That's my personal favorite Traffic album too.
Yeah.
And I had a big Traffic phase in college when I was kind of going back and trying to like rediscover and like basically fill in all the gaps on like, music from the 60s and 70s. I had this year in my sophomore year in college where I kind of did that. I just bought, like everything. And I was huge into Traffic. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this band isn't talked about more, and they've kind of had a little bit of a resurgence, I think, recently. But everybody seems to talk about Mr. Fantasy, like, and I think maybe that's just kind of like
a great song, and it's very poppy too, with Hole in My Shoe and some of those other.
Oh, it's a great album. I love that album too, but I think in the vinyl community, especially because of like the big psych thing, so many people
psychedelic.
Yeah. I not just kidding, psych. No, like, yes, psychedelic. Yeah, but a lot of people seem to talk about that one more, and that one I think is better album for sure. Okay, so this is the last one in that theme that I have, where again it was an album that could not be topped, still hasn't been topped, but was followed up by something that I still think was really special and not given as much credence as it should have, and that's Diamonds in the Rough by John Prine. This is probably my I don't know. It's hard to do a ranking because I love his music so much, but I feel like this album is a lot of times overlooked because of when it came out, following that debut, and that debut got so much attention, and he had this, at the time everybody was looking for the next Dylan, and there were like how many songwriters that were given that label, and he was given that label with that album, and I always thought that was odd, and that's why I love this one so much, because it pushes the country folk influence even further, and it's so raw. it was like recorded in like 3 days for like under 10 grand. And it's really just him and his brother, and like I think David Bromberg's on here, and oh, obviously Steve Goodman, his good friend Steve Goodman. But it's very simple and in its approach, and it couldn't be. It's just so different, it's so loose, from the first, compared to the first album, and I think that it was kind of brilliant in that way, because it I feel like this is when people really, it's like, I think when he put this out, it was like, oh, okay, this is who John Prine is. Like, he's obviously a gifted songwriter, and that first album and all of those songs are an amazing set of songs, but he takes his sense of humor even a bit further, and it's also just raw. And he was just such a simple guy, and salt of the earth, as people would say, or whatever.
That's such a good album too. You're right.
It's a great album. Of course,
yeah.
Souvenirs is one of his best songs ever, which is on here.
I think it's wonderful how he's gotten a new audience, because I remember even beyond that, even after the 70s and into the 80s, he always played around. He'd come touring around San Francisco. I saw him 3 or 4 times over the years, and then all of a sudden, the last decade, he became this, like, rightly so, in a good positive way, this sort of darling of the alt country and Americana scene. I mean, almost like he was put up on this pedestal. And I'm not, because he never really had that. Same with like Townes Van Zandt, and I know they're kind of different, but I remember those records. We hardly sold any Townes records. He had a cult following.
Right. Well,
it's funny how now everybody is. I mean,
it's because John Prine embraced all of these folks himself. I mean, he started in the 90s with Iris DeMent, and then just kind of kept that going on. He would often take female singer-songwriters on the road with him to open for him, and then come out and perform songs with him. That really kind of became a regular thing. And he did that, up until his death. I mean, he and his family were good friends with, and everybody loves when I mention him, but Jason Isbell and his wife Amanda. Like, his wife Amanda actually knew John better, because before she and Jason even became a couple, she toured with John Prine a lot. So yeah, it's almost like he was kind of like the grandfather of that whole Nashville scene that's not a part of the mainstream shit.
Not the slick Nashville thing going on. Absolutely.
Yeah. And but yeah, I mean, for me, it was the 90s. I mean, I discovered him in the 90s personally. And so, like, I've been a huge fan ever since. I think that was kind of when his resurgence started, but it has even recently been more before he died, and
absolutely.
He's dead, it's just gonna blow up, like
it's like he's knighted, like sainthood in a way.
Yeah, right. Right.
Saint John.
Yeah.
At least
it's sad. That one was
a great thing about him. He's one of those guys with the name John who spells it correctly. So, okay, I'm going to go with the next band, 4 Jewish fellows and Scots from Berkeley, California in the 60s, became one of the premier of the San Francisco psychedelic bands, came from a real kind of blues folk, that came out of the folk scene. And that is Country Joe and the Fish. And this is, I Feel Like I'm Fixing to Die. Now, all the psychedelic people here love, and myself included, Electric Music for the Mind and Body, their first album on Vanguard Records. Great record, great psychedelic, not so sweet Martha Lorraine. Got a lot of airplay, at least in the San Francisco area at the time. This is their second album that came out late 67, early 68. I think this has the better songwriting than the first album. First album is more psychedelic. This has the better songwriting by far. Chicken Hirsch, Bruce Barthol, Barry Melton, David Cohen. Jew or not Jew? You could, if we were doing a drinking game, every time I mentioned a Jewish name, I'd be drunk. And then Joe McDonald, who was the primary songwriter, but really him and Barry Melton, who was a guitar player. He was the Fish. This album has one of the most beautiful songs that Joe McDonald ever wrote, called Janice. And it was obviously about Janis Joplin, who he was dating at the time, and a song called Magoo, Colored for Susan, Thursday. So there's some, and Who Am I? Really haunting, beautiful ballads. And of course it opens up with the Fish cheer, which became the Fuck cheer in Woodstock. And I Feel Like I'm Fixing to Die, which is kind of based on a traditional ragtime song. And what I remember real vaguely or vividly when I got this, it came with, and I still have a copy of the game, the Fish game.
Oh, cool.
So you'd open it up, you'd cut out the players, and you make this. And when I first got it, I cut this apart, and we played this all the time. I swear to God, we were 14 years old. We'd play the Fish game. I got another copy because once I worked in record stores, you slice them open, you pull out the goodies, and and you update your copy. But a gorgeous record on Vanguard Records. All their records from 66, 67 to 70 were produced by a guy named Sam Charters, who was a musicologist. He, in a way, was like Alan Lomax, where he really searched the South and recorded blues artists like Howlin' Wolf, and wrote a famous book in the late 50s called Country Blues, I believe it's called, kind of the book on country blues. But he, brought this folk group into the psychedelic scene, which they started playing more electric, at the ballrooms, the Avalon and Fillmore. Just a beautiful, beautiful record. Really pretty record, and it's prettier, if I can say that, in a San Francisco, Berkeley psychedelic way, than their first more psychedelic record. Gorgeous record, and includes the full color Fish game with instructions.
Yeah, that's cool. I have an album by a North Carolina band that was not very well known that I will talk about eventually in my series, and that they had a board game, not a board game because it's just a piece of paper. They had that with their album too. I don't have a copy with that. They're impossible to find, but yeah, that's cool. It came after that one though, so they thought of it first. But anyway, okay, so the next few albums are kind of like sophomore albums that are way better, in my opinion, way better than the debuts. And a lot of times it's because the debuts were actually a little bit too raw, not necessarily lo-fi, well, in one sense, lo-fi. And I felt that studio production actually helped it. And that's
Nirvana,
kind of
probably.
Right. Well, and that's with a lot of people my age. Not that I'm young, I'm not young at all, but my generation, like right around my age, early 40s, that was kind of like a thought that you were not allowed to express. That studio production was a good thing, it's just not
Your lo-fi indie stuff.
Yeah, lo-fi indie stuff or punk stuff or raw, or it was. But I think in the next three albums I talk about, in these cases, it helped and actually kind of helped them become better bands. And this is the old 97's Wreck Your Life. This is my personal favorite album by them. This came out in 95 or 96 on Bloodshot. And this actually kind of brought Bloodshot Records, kind of elevated Bloodshot Records. They're still a very small label and still kind of boutique in a way. But this was kind of their first release that really brought them to another level. This is just a fantastic record, alt country, wonderful sense of humor, very kind of, there's still more kind of rockabilly sound to this. It's not alt country in the way that like Uncle Tupelo or Sunvolt or any of that, or the Jayhawks, it's a little bit more rootsy, but just an absolutely fantastic record. And their first album was just kind of a little too ramshackle. It was just too raw. I think they just didn't have the budget, or something to put out what they really wanted. But I think the songwriting, the sound, the sonics of this album is just such an improvement. And definitely not. This definitely puts the sophomore slump term it proves it wrong, in my opinion. But yeah.
Well, that's you talk about a label getting recognition after something. It's very much like, I'm not including an obvious choices. Nevermind Nirvana.
Right.
Went to Geffen Records and paid a
Yeah.
shitload of money
Yeah.
to Sub Pop after Bleach. And the irony, I've heard interviews with the founders of Sub Pop. They were, like, in a way, flabbergasted looking back on it, that they were allowed to keep the rights to Bleach. And that, like, aside from just getting the big payout, they still got to put out that record, and they sold tons of Bleach, obviously more after the fact, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going in the 70s. This is an artist who I really like, and for some reason, a lot of people, he's not hip enough for everybody these days, because a lot of people in the vinyl community aren't hip or don't like the Eagles, for instance. After a while,
Yeah.
I like the Eagles, but this is not the Eagles.
I hate the Eagles. I hate the Eagles.
I like the Eagles, but I like this guy better, actually. It's Jackson Browne. And
yes,
especially the run he had up until Lawyers in Love. That's kind of, but everything up till that. This record is obviously his sophomore record, and it's called For Every Man. Original copy with the cutout insert, or not insert, the cutout gatefold. Little fucked up, but considering this is a record from 1973, it's in pretty damn good, pristine shape.
Yeah.
Now, it opens up with a song that he co-wrote, Take It Easy, with Glenn Frey, which became that huge song. So my guess is he made enough that any of us will make in our lifetime from the Eagles' greatest hits of publishing that song. But I Thought I Was a Child, and These Days was a song that was recorded first by Tom Rush and Nico, as in Velvet Underground Nico, before he put it on his album. This record actually got him more traction. The first song on this, and this is the first record that he was joined pretty much for the duration with David Lindley on guitar. David Lindley on guitar and string instruments added a whole other sound to his records. Gave him a little more ballsy, although I do like his first record, Saturate, before using. But Redneck Friend is a song that is one of those double entendre.
Yeah.
The old, yanking thing about my redneck friend.
Yeah.
I don't have to say any more, read between the lines. But I Thought It Was a Child. Bill Payne from Little Feat is on here. David Lindley.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Jim Keltner, Greg Allman arranged and inspired These Days for him. Just great LA. Joni Mitchell is on here. Great LA from the whole Laurel Canyon thing, the second phase of Laurel Canyon. But a gorgeous, gorgeous record. And I'd say this is a keeper. Beautifully recorded, beautifully produced, and 1973. But maybe not hip for some of you freaks out there into psych music all the time. But a gorgeous record.
I love that album. I considered that one, but I didn't pick it because I thought
it wasn't hip enough.
Well, I thought there just might be a chance that you would pick it.
It's funny. I didn't think I was going to pick that album, and I just thought.
Yeah. Well, I just figure compared to other things that I did pick,
we could get so hip, ultra hip, over the top hip, but fuck it.
Well, these days, and I think he even says thank you to Greg Allman in the liner notes, because it was actually Greg Allman's cover of These Days that inspired him to re-record it, because it's more similar to Greg Allman's cover, way more like. And I actually Jackson Browne's recorded version of that song is my favorite. I think Nico's is beautiful.
I love Tom Rush's. That's what I first heard.
Oh, yeah,
song. And he's got this low baritone voice.
Yeah,
it's very not throaty, but he's just so low in that voice like that.
I've actually never heard that version. I don't think.
I'll look it up. You're gonna go listen to it
immediately. It'll be the first thing I do. I promise. Well, actually, I can segue into that, because this artist did a cover of These Days 2, which is pretty decent. And this
What a
is her second
coincidence.
album. Actor. This is Annie Clark as St. Vincent.
I love her, and she's a great guitar player, right?
Amazing guitar
Yeah.
player. And
People put
that,
her in a weird box sometimes. They don't get it.
no, they don't get it. And she's done a little bit of that to herself with her latest album, because she did kind of go explore pop sounds a little bit, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that people, well, a lot of female artists, people want to pigeonhole and they want to put them in some kind of. I think that she is one of the best art rock artists going right now, if not the best. And I really feel like she's continuing a legacy that was kind of started by David Bowie, you know, in the 70s and people like that. Or David Byrne, you know, and the Talking Heads, you know, who she's worked with.
I love that
I don't,
collaboration. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't know if she's really inventing anything, but I feel like she's staying true to creativity and she's a great songwriter. A lot of
I don't
people
know that
give her
album. I
enough
need to
credit.
get that album. I need to get that album.
This isn't my favorite, but this was the one that really got people to start paying attention to her. This is her second one.
I think she pissed some people off in the last year producing Slater-Kinney.
She did. I think that album's great. I love that album. And I think that there were probably some songs on that album that definitely sound like her music, but I don't think she totally overtook the band. You know, I still think it sounds like a Slater-Kinney record.
Yeah. I mean, watch on YouTube her doing her and her electric guitar only, singing and playing I Dig a Pony, the Beatles song. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. I never saw that. That's cool.
Oh,
What was that on?
A couple of performances of her doing it, and she does that whole da 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 da
Yeah.
da.
Yeah.
And that's like a not easy, you know, it's not really flashy, but it's just really, it's kind of an odd song to begin with. And she comes alone. It's great.
Yeah, she went to Berklee School of Music in Boston, and you know, that's a prestigious school of music. She's incredibly gifted, like, and has all the skill in the world. But I think it's the sounds that she creates, like with her guitar, the pedals that she uses, and just kind of the sonic, you know, world that she creates, like with guitar. Like a lot of times you can't even tell it's guitar on the album until you see her play live, and then you realize, oh, that was her damn guitar. This has a little bit more leftover of kind of like experimental pop, kind of chamber sound almost. There's some more like strings and stuff involved on this album. She used to do like some work with Sufjan Stevens, and so I think that she was in his band for a little while. She was also in Polyphonic Spree. And well, so
was I. And you're probably
right.
I think everyone was in that
I think
band.
Everybody was in that band.
People just show up and play in that band forever. Right. If you don't know Polyphonic Spree, you got to Google them and you'll understand what we're talking about.
But she got out of the cult and made it onto her own thing. And there's a little bit of that kind of epic kind of sound in this album too. But I know a lot of people didn't really get into her until maybe 2 albums after this. So if you're one of those folks, I would go back to this one because it's got some fantastic songs on it. And I just love that cover photo. I think it's amazing. But yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I don't know if she's on any of these records.
Of course you would have. I think she was just like a touring member of that band.
Oh.
Yeah, but like, yeah, of course you would have something.
I love that stuff.
I
went through, well, at least I went through a period. What was that, in the early 2000s?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm going back to San Francisco because I always do.
Okay.
This band had one of the most famous and great debut albums out of the San Francisco scene. And the album totally bombed because Columbia Records fucked them over. And instead of putting out one great single from the album, I think they released 5 singles at once. They had a big party, and of course, nobody knew what to play. The song should have been Omaha off their debut, but the second Moby Grape album called Wow. Now,
Oh,
this to me, this album has grown in stature, and I've got to love it. First of all, it's one of my favorite album covers of all time. Wow, Moby Grape, Wow, with a
yeah.
cover collage by Bob Cato for Columbia Records. What's interesting about this record, it's kind of a rock and roll, funky soul thing, which wasn't really happening in San Francisco at the time. Um, there's one song on here called Murder in My Heart for the Judge, which I think some band, if they haven't covered it, should cover. It's just a great, dirgy, rock and roll, swampy song that wasn't happening in San Francisco. Skip Spence and Jerry Miller, of course, Skip Spence, who did Or, who kind of went crazy,
Yeah.
acid crazy, like a number of other people. What was fun about this, I remember getting it, and luckily at the time I had a turntable. Actually, the one I have downstairs here plays 78s, but at the end of side 1, the last track has an introduction by an old radio person named Arthur Godfrey. If you ever know Arthur Godfrey, was this kind of, old radio singer, narrator, orchestra band leader. And he sings this song and he introduces the song. And then it says, now it's time to get up. And then they say, it's time to get up and turn your record to 78. So you have to turn your record at 78 RPM to play the final song on side 1.
Oh, really?
It's cut at 78. And it's called Just Like Gene Autry, a Foxtrot. And it sounds like these old sort of 40s foxtrot bands in the clubs and stuff. Funky record too, really good. A song called Motorcycle Irene, beautiful song called He. And it came packaged with a second record, a second jam record. So for the price of one, it came with this called Grape Jam.
Okay, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people will see this in the used bins and they don't see this with it. And Grape Jam was David Rubinson, who produced Santana, a lot of worked for Columbia as a staff producer for years, produced this. It was a jam they did in the studio at Columbia Studios with Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper. Wow. So it's very jammy, so it's kind of a cool record, just jam, guitar, bluesy stuff.
Yeah.
And the little thing I'll say at the end, the last song is a 4-minute song called The Lake. And it's sort of an audio montage, spoken word, with this poem called The Lake. And what's interesting about it from my point of view, KFRC was the big AM station in San Francisco, along with KYA. They had a contest, a poetry, a songwriting contest. And I entered it. I don't even remember what I entered, but if you sent in whoever the winner was, those lyrics would be on the next Moby Grape album. So, of course, instead of, I don't know how they convinced the band, but they ended up doing this jam album and stuck it at the end of the jam album and just made it a montage. Instead of writing songs, it was kind of a montagey, psychedelic, swirly thing, sang the song by, and the very end it says, by Michael Hayworth. And that's the guy who won the contest and wrote the lyrics.
Oh, wow.
Grape Jam came with Moby Grape's Wow. This record has gotten better over the years for me personally, a lot of other people. And not as good as their first album, which has become, their most famous, obviously.
I only have that one. That's the only one I have.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So.
Yeah. I was going to ask how many, was Skip Spence with them the whole time that they were, or did he?
Well, no. They kind of did these albums. They did Moby Grape 69. They did Truly Fine Citizen. I can't remember when he split out and he did that solo album. I'm thinking 68, 69. I can't remember. Or totally bomb. And it's become this huge cult thing. And
Or's great. Because you got that one that's a tribute. That
More Or's, all these, from Robert Plant to Beck, all these great people covering songs. And it's just elevated. He's one of those guys that just became this cult figure, like Sid Barrett in a way,
Right.
Okay, sir.
All right, so this one is another one that their debut album was actually very lo-fi. And I think that this one and the one that follows it are two of the better records that have come out, in the last 20 years. Uh, this is a band that I like. I like a lot. Their more recent albums, not as much, but still, I still really like them. This band is called Real Estate, and this is their
Oh,
album
I
Days.
I have that album.
Yeah, it came out in 2011. It's kind of a mix of jangle and surf and dream pop, I guess, kind of. This is a great, great album, and it's one that you kind of have to be into the sound, I think. Um, but if you are into that kind of sound, if you're into jangle pop, like our friend Hannah the Mahana
I was
Introvert,
going to
I
say
think
she
she would
probably
really
has a
like.
better subgenre name to name that we haven't even heard of yet.
Yeah,
Hi,
I
Hannah.
just I just know it's a kind of a combination of those three things. I don't know what else
It's
to
probably the
label it as.
real estate MLS listing subgenre of psychedelic, flowery homeowner pop.
Okay, yeah, that
Real
sounds
estate.
good. From New Jersey, because that's where they're from. It doesn't sound like something out of New Jersey, does it? But
And
yeah,
you can get
this
that. I think every time you get that, it's always above asking.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Mortgage rates are going up, so be careful.
Right. No, this is a really, really good album. If any of those genres that I threw out appeal to you and you don't know this, you should check it out.
Yeah.
The guitar work on this, especially, is really, really good. But it is kind of, it's not a rock record, but it's really, really
Okay.
good stuff.
A lot of the stuff we're showing is not rock. Okay, I'm going with another Bay Area. Their first album was on Columbia. That it did really nothing, but their second album was a live record, and it got so much airplay on the West Coast, and there became this cult thing. I did a feature on them with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. Where's the Money?
Yeah.
Where's the Money? Live, an amazing record, a combination of jazzy, Django Reinhardt, Western swing, humor, very acoustic based with the rock, with the Lickettes. So that kind of Mills Brothers, Andrew Sisters harmony after this.
Yeah.
Really great record. There's a song on here, well, Where's the Money? Reelin' Down by Hook or by Crook. I feel like singing. He has these great little intros to some of the songs that are very funny, but they went to Blue Thumb Records, and I have all their records and even their solo stuff. Dan Hicks died about 4 years ago, I believe. Used to see them so many times at the boarding house in San Francisco, and they had a huge following. They influenced a lot of bands, and in fact, I don't know why they split up so soon. Like 73, they split up, and they were the opening act on their last shows ever at Winterland. I went both nights. They opened up for the Kinks at Winterland. That's when I saw them. And Mary Ann, who was in the group, went on to sing on, I think, not Village Green, but the two RCA comps, that records they did. I'm blanking out right now. The Kinks Preservation Society. And she sang with Ray Davies, went on the road with the Kinks for a while. Really great record. I love these guys. Where's the Money? Has sort of that kind of old-timey feel, but it doesn't feel dated. And it was so different than what was happening, in the scene in San Francisco. A little more rootsy in a way, before rootsy was really kind of hip.
Yeah, I have a friend that was just not that they're that sound, but he was a flat picker, or is a flat picker, plays guitar, really talented guy. And he got me into a lot of bluegrass, but he was really into that band, he really liked Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. I remember him.
Great, this guy Sid, great violin player. So that violin gypsy sound that added to it, which is really nice. Stand-up bass, acoustic. We're an electric band, but just really tight in that acoustic way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good one. This is Nothing Like That. And I just played this album yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's a Sophomore album. I'll talk about that. And if you know how to pronounce her name, help me. But it's the Swedish artist. Is it Lika Lee? I don't remember how to say her name.
Let me see close on that. I don't know her.
You don't know her? Gosh, I'm really feel bad that I didn't look it up ahead of time. I usually do that when I do my videos. I usually, if it's a name that I'm not sure about, I scour the internet to try and find proper
I
pronunciation.
think we need to
And
ask Rob at Sound Strange because he seems to produce everything. Don't ask Steve
well,
Carlson. See, if you're watching
yeah,
this in 10
he'll
years,
butcher it.
yeah, if this is 10 years from now watching this video, you have no idea who these people were
It
talking about.
might be, I don't know. I'm not even
Maybe
gonna,
it's pronounced Charday.
yeah, right. But no, she's great. You would really like her, I think. I'm surprised you don't know.
I haven't got any VCLT in a while.
This is her second album, obviously, but her first album was called Youth Novels. It came out in 2008.
My birthday is
And
next weekend.
it was a little kind of all over the place, kind of hodgepodgey. And this was a lot more focused. She is you would know her from, she sings on that Peter, Bjorn, and John song that was really popular, that was in like commercials and stuff, called Young Folks. You know that song? But anyway,
I know Peter, Paul, and Mary. I don't know Peter Bjorn.
No.
Is that one? Is that the album that Is that the album Peter, Paul, and Mary did with ABBA?
No, but it kind of sounds like that. Some of it, but you would know that song if you heard it. I know you would know that song.
Okay.
But Bjorn, from Peter, Bjorn, and John, co-produced, co-wrote a lot of the songs in this. But this is really good. This is really good.
Okay.
It's got kind of like a electro pop kind of sound, but it's darker, and it's also got kind of like a very retro kind of 60s sound, like brought into it.
Looks like heavy rock on the cover. Is that?
She has four albums. This is the second one. I'm surprised. The song "I Follow Rivers" was a pretty big song.
Don't know.
And yeah, but this is outstanding stuff. You should listen to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That's it.
I'm gonna go with like this is probably the most obvious choice of everything, and this is probably on if you Google sophomore record, just comes up. But I just love this record, and I love this record, and I think it gives his first record a run for the money. It's probably even better, really. But the first record was so different at the time, and that's Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
This year's model.
Yep.
There were, in fact, this is my UK edition, my original UK, and it came out with like 4 different covers. I don't know if it's 4 different covers, different positions of him with the Hasselblad camera. But Pump It Up, I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. The drumming and the funkiness in a punky, post-punk, pre-punk way is just amazing. I mean, no action, the very beginning, 2-minute song.
One of the best. That's one of the greatest lead tracks ever.
Totally. Oh my God, I don't want to go to Chelsea though. It's like, the English young punk and new wavy people like the Clash and Elvis Costello and the like, and all these UK bands, they could get away with making reggae work from white people for some reason. Yeah. I don't know many American bands that really made it work a lot. But anyway, I'm not going to say any more about this. Keep it short. But what a great record! Every time I put this record, it's just like you want to just stand up and angry young man.
Yeah, that's an all-time favorite for me. That's a big one. I kind of avoided that, picking these albums out. That's one of my favorite albums.
It's an obvious one, but I just thought I wanted to throw. But
that's one of my all-time favorite albums.
For all the people that say, "How come you didn't pick Nevermind or Led Zeppelin 2?" Give me a break.
Right.
The second Strange Days by the Doors.
Yeah, that was a little less obvious, but the band. I thought about that one, the band's second album.
I thought about that, but that's like the obvious choice. I love that.
Yeah, it's an obvious one. But yeah, I mean, my son is a huge Elvis Costello fan now. And I don't know how, I don't remember, might have been one that I kind of pushed on him. I think I played Pump It Up for him just to see how he would react. And now he loves it. He really loves the new song, one of his new songs, No Flag. Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. He loves that song, and that song's crazy. And I was shocked that he was, but you never know.
Brainwashing our 4-year-old is the way to go in music. I
Yeah.
brainwashed my son so much musically.
Oh, yeah, he's all about Elvis Costello now. And one of our cats is named Costello after him. So he says the guy that's named after our cat. That's what he says.
Okay. Well, if you get another cat, you got to name him Abbott. So
Yeah, no, not that. But yeah. Okay. So here's one that would probably be on one of those lists because it's a pretty famous album. But I just thought I should talk about. I just wanted to talk about it because I never talk about too many hugely popular artists. But Amy Winehouse's "Back to Black" was, and I also chose it because this was obviously the last thing that she did too, before she tragically died. But this album is an amazing album,
it is.
and the kind of funny story, maybe not funny. The song "Rehab" was like the big lead single, and it sounds nothing like the rest of the album, really. Even though it does sound like a lot of stuff that Mark Ronson kind of produced in these years, like for artists like Lily Allen and things like that, artists like that. But that song, I had a girlfriend at the time who loved that song, and it kind of soured my preconceptions of Amy Winehouse. It was like a contentious relationship. We were probably drunk about 75% of the time we were around each other, but and so that song in particular, I just kind of never. But when you get to the rest of this album, and especially the title track, there's a lot of depth to this album. It's extremely sophisticated. It's not for somebody that kind of took on the persona of like a Courtney Love or someone like that was kind of a drug addicted, alcoholic mess, really, just to be honest. This album is just so sophisticated and just incredible blues and jazz, and it's just a great album. And someone that had a lot of success that I don't know, it's just maybe not somebody but that a lot of people would think I would have in my collection, but I do. It's a great album. Really sad what happened to her. I mean,
yeah.
But
member of the 27 Club. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going with an East LA band. They did one independent record for Slash Records. Slash Records gets picked up by Warner Brothers, and this is their second album with their major debut. I think they're one of the great American bands, and I mean that in so many ways. And that's Los Lobos.
Oh yeah,
Los Lobos. How will the Wolf survive? Their first record, I think it was their first record. Several records they've done all Spanish, but Latin Spanish band with one white guy. But this was produced by T-Bone Burnett and Steve Berlin, and it's a gorgeous record, a gorgeous sounding record. Really amazing songwriting and their vocals. Obviously, they got huge for a minute. Because of the La Bamba soundtrack, which is a great soundtrack.
Yeah,
they did the vocals for Richie, not Richie Havens, Richie Valens. No, yeah. But this band is great. I've seen them maybe a handful of times. Saw them a couple of times in the '70s. Last time I saw them was about 10 years ago at the Fillmore in San Francisco. And what a lot of people don't realize, they do acoustic sets of their Latin music and Spanish-speaking music. They do a lot of their hits and their songs here, but they really stretch and do really interesting covers. And they're almost like what the Grateful Dead was live, where they could play for 2 hours or 3 hours and do covers. They do, like the last two times I saw them at the Fillmore, they did covers of Tomorrow Never Knows, the Beatles song. And it was a psychedelic jam. But so they do these great cover versions of songs, and they're so good. But this is a beautiful sounding record.
Yeah, I love that album. That's wonderful, a really good cover. One.
Great sophomore record. Los Lobos, again, one of the great American rock and roll bands, and they're more than just that. They're great. They've been
Yeah.
doing some live, the YouTube type live shows, concerts, which are
Yeah,
pretty
in the
cool.
90s and early 2000s, they really kind of tapped into that jam band audience. Like for a while, um, they have some of the better episodes of Austin City Limits, or ones where they
Oh,
were on
I
it.
need to see those. I never saw them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really, really good. I need more of their out, and those early ones you can really find cheap.
They're
Like
really good.
it's criminal kind
Yeah.
of how cheap you can find
We
their
had
albums.
Taco Tuesday here last night. It's actually Taco Thursday, and had I picked up. I don't usually go out, but there's a place, Fonda Katrina, in the Georgetown area of Seattle.
Mhm.
I used to go to twice a week because when I first moved here, I couldn't find good Mexican food in Seattle,
Yeah,
which really surprised me. And living in the
yeah,
Mission for 25 years, living in San Francisco, the amazing cheap Mexican food there. I finally found this place, Fonda La Katrina. Shout out to Fonda La Katrina. But because of the pandemic, I hadn't been there now in the last 5 months. But it was shrimp tacos, and I picked them up, brought them here. We had mezcal cocktails, and I played one of their Spanish records. It just seemed like a
yeah,
perfect,
yeah. Steve
theme.
Carlson is a big fan of them. Um, okay, so these two are kind of more kind of classic albums. I don't know if they're really on those top lists of sophomore albums, but they're classic albums. The first one I'm going to talk about is uh yeah, no, sorry. Power,
Oh,
Corruption, and Lies by New Order. And the reason why I decided to talk about this one is because that first album, Movement, still kind of it sounded like well, we're what's left of Joy Division still. A lot of that album, it was different than Joy Division in some ways, but it still kind of had that, especially vocally, it still kind of had um trying to kind of hold on to that kind of like darker, more kind of rigid sound.
depressing
This
kind of,
was
yeah.
Yeah, this was the first album where I really felt like um I felt like I was 5 when this came out. You know what I'm saying? Where when you retrospectively you look at their discography, and this is the one where it's really like this is really New Order, like for the first time. And then they just kind of progress from there. But this is a fantastic album and such an improvement. I know Movement is still good, and I know a lot of people like kind of have a place in their heart for that album, but I feel like this was like they really kind of found their identity, and this is really like such an improvement on that
And
first one.
so simple, but that's still also one of my very favorite album covers. Peter Seville
Yeah,
chose that painting from the National Portrait Gallery, I believe, uh, and just licensed it, and that is a
yeah,
gorgeous album cover.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then this little
the color
small
bar.
detail there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
and
have an original UK of that. Just a beautiful design.
yeah, yeah.
You know me, I like to showcase designs and cover art in paintings, and
Right.
that's that stuff. Just, I mean, I should do a video of 10 records I bought just because of the covers. That'd be a good one.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going with for my second to the last choice here, pick of sophomore records. I'm going with a family of three, all three sophomore records by the family. I wonder if you can guess who they are. Most people probably can't. You might be able to guess.
Hmm.
And they're a combination of American and Canadian.
I don't know what I'm like. I keep wanting to make a Peter, Paul, and Mary joke because of earlier.
Loudon Wainwright III.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is album 2, so it even says 2, their sophomore
Yeah.
record. I
Yeah.
love him. Also, there's a song on here called Nice Jewish Girl, so of course I gotta like that.
Yeah.
Me and My Friend the
Yeah.
Cat. He's someone that hasn't had the same, I mean, he's got a cult following, but not like John Prine, and I hate to put him in the same boat, but he came around that same time. His
Yeah.
records on First Atlantic and then Columbia, they're all friggin' fantastic. He's got an
Yeah.
amazing sense of humor. He writes great songs. They're funny songs, Old Paint, Old Friend, Winter Songs, the Suicide Song. Of course, he got probably most noted and more airplay, at least on the FM stations in the 70s, because he did a song called Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road. And that was like, it almost seemed like a novelty song, but really a beautiful, beautiful record. So this is 1973, I'm thinking, 71. God, it's even earlier.
Yeah.
So I was in high school when this came out. Great record. I got into him right off his first album, but love this record. And of course, his wife was one of the McGarrigle sisters. And,
yeah.
And so he was married to Kate McGarrigle, Canadian, from Ontario, French Canadian. This is their sophomoric record, and it's got some songs sung in French and English, produced by one of my favorite producers, Joe Boyd, who Joe Boyd produced the very first Pink Floyd single, American Expatriate, moved to England. He was the one who produced Fairport Convention and Sandy Denny, and Nick Drake he discovered and produced Nick Drake, and so many others. His autobiography, Bicycle Something, is an amazing, amazing record. This is a gorgeous record. Love this record to pieces. And of course, they had two kids, Martha Wainwright and Rufus Wainwright. Poses, his sophomore record, is a gorgeous piano-based, pop, classical, almost like ingenue. I don't even know how to describe this, but it's got this song, it starts Cigarette and Chocolate Milk, and it ends with, I remember for some reason, Joseph, my son, I played the CD in the car, and this came out in 2001, so he would have been 11. He loved this record. It's almost like it could be songs for children if it wasn't so songs about desperation and alienation and, identity. Obviously, he came out as a young boy. He came out of the closet very early, which is very ironic because on an early song that his father wrote on one of the albums by Loudon Wainwright III, there's a song called Rufus is a Tit Man, sucking on his mama's gland. He's oral. Okay. Is that prophetic or what? But this has one extra track that was added, which is from a John Lennon type of thing called his version of Across the Universe.
Across the Universe,
That's on like a remix version on the end. It almost doesn't fit on. I mean, I like when it's on the CD. I almost wish it wasn't on here because I don't think it works with the flow, especially when it closes with freeze.
So was it originally on the album? Or was it added? Because I think he did.
Well, I don't know if this ever came out on vinyl initially. My guess is it did not. But
I remember when he did that cover, it had like a video and everything. It was on MTV. I want to say he was on the I Am Sam soundtrack with that or something. But
yes, I think so. Yeah. And so they stuck it on here, but this is a beautiful record. It is a little depressing. A little is do therapy, but poses. And
I'm not afraid of that
really
stuff,
interesting.
Obviously.
He has a really interesting, what?
I'm not afraid of that stuff.
No, I'm not either. I love depressing, introspective music. And I love that he did a thing, like a whole cover live show that became an album, which I don't have. He covered the entire Judy Garland at Carnegie Hall album. He does it like in drag, and he has a brand new album that I have not heard, but I just think he made a series of records here on Geffen that are really, really good. For a while, I think I have 5 of his records. I bought them all at the time, but great.
Yeah, I only have, what was it called? Want 1 and Want 2.
Want 1. Yeah, those are great
records. I have those on CD, but that's it. And Loudon Wainwright is one of those that I always feel like guilty that I don't have like any of his records. I bought one and I didn't hang on to it because it didn't grab me. It's not that I don't like him. I just think that he's one of those artists I feel like I gotta devote some time to get into. The discography is not necessarily daunting or anything, but it's like I don't know. It's just
Right. You know, he writes songs and plays a song. He's really out there, almost like this.
yeah,
He's like the Jim Carrey, where John Prine is more uh,
yeah,
intimate. And I don't try to think a comedian who's more low key. Stephen Wright, not really Stephen
yeah,
Wright, but he's
right,
more personal. Even though he writes about Prine writes about other types of things going on in
yeah,
America, real things.
yeah,
You know, it's different. In fact, you know, if you
yeah.
ever saw the TV show Undeclared, he acts in it. He plays the main
Yeah,
protagonist's father. He acted
he's
also. So
he's in Big Fish,
yeah,
the Tim Burton movie.
yeah he's
He's
in a lot of acting
he
bits.
did a lot of acting. Yeah, he did a lot of
He's a
acting.
quirky guy, but good guy.
Yeah,
And his
yeah.
father was very famous too, because his father was the editor for Life magazine for all through the 60s and
Oh wow.
70s, 50s and 60s. And you, at the very beginning of Life magazine, you look at those pages, it's Loudon Wainwright, the second,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Huh, that's
Okay, one
cool.
more. We're closing out one each.
Yeah. So last one, and this is another pretty big one now. But it's the second album by the Talking Heads. More songs about buildings and food. And this is again another one where I felt like this was when this band, the first album has its moments, and it's a good debut album. I think it's a solid debut album. But this one to me was when they really started to find their identity. You know, like you can start to hear um, some of the things that they would just kind of like focus on, you know, and in their subsequent albums, you know. And I think it's a good kind of bridge between Talking Head 77 and Fear of Music. You know, it still has its kind of some like acoustic moments on it, but you can also really hear kind of like the guitar interplay and kind of the real art rock kind of sounds start to come together on this one. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought out of all the other ones that I talk about, to talk about two kind of more classic albums to
I do
round
have
it
a
out.
cool promo piece from that Sire Records. Again, that was when I worked in business, and I have the same 12-inch puzzle of that cover, and I
Mhm.
have it framed in one of those record cover frames, like from IKEA, but it's lying
Yeah.
flat, and I'm missing the bottom right piece. When I moved, I don't know where it
Oh,
went. So if anyone has the bottom right piece, an extra bottom right piece of that cover of the puzzle, I have that. It's a promo thing, kind of
yeah.
cool thing. Okay, I'm ending with hard rock psychedelic masterpiece, second album, and it's called The Second. And it's, you know, two or three of their songs are anthem of the 60s, and that's Steppenwolf the Second.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And of course, the first album has Born to Be Wild, which
Yeah.
is one of the great rock and roll songs of all time, even made more famous in Easy Rider. But this song starts out with Faster Than the Speed of Life, which is a great song. The famous song on here is one of their second most favorite songs, is Magic Carpet Ride. The
Yeah.
recording of this, it's what's great about this, there's really no reverb. It's very dry sounding record, great rock and roll record. Original copy on ABC done here with this foil cover. But it also has a piece which very psychedelic whimsy, like orchestrate strings, called Spiritual Fantasy, that John Kay wrote. Canadians, this is a Canadian / American rock band. Don't Step on the Grass, Sam, John Kay, which is kind of a dirgy thing. In a way, the same kind of tempo as The Pusher from their first album. And I remember I was making these montage tapes when I was a kid, when this album had a little small reel to reel. And at the very end of that, you hear them getting raided and the cops breaking the door, woman screaming. At the very end, you hear the toilet flushing. So they're flushing their dope down the toilets. I used to record that and use it in all these montages, these toilet flushing. That's what a 14, 13-year-old does. We like
Yeah.
toilet humor. And we like
Yeah.
just a great record. Every song is good, but I'd like to get really good. You know, I've been doing a couple of videos lately with this with Michael in Germany, audiophile, 45 RPM audiophile,
Mhm.
and I've been getting a few MoFis, and I have this MoFi of the Best of Steppenwolf, which is really good. But I find that The first Have I Love, and their songs after that aren't really that great to me. But their first two records, I'd like MoFi copies of those, because I haven't had good copies, but all the copies, when I try to find another copy, they're all kind of scratchy because those records are played so much.
I always kind of felt like they were one of those bands that those singles almost kind of hurt them, like hurt their legacy, like moving forward, because they're like Born to Be Wild is just so big. It's almost like a caricature of itself.
Well,
that a lot of people don't even want to dig into
they got into
the
like
deeper tracks.
Monster's a big cult record for them because there's that whole long piece suite that's so political at the time. Amazing piece. And I got into that years later. But these first two albums, start to finish, are great, almost perfect records. One little side note, for years, John Kay, and I don't know if it was the Hells Angels or some big motorcycle group, every year, and I don't know if it was the 4th of July, but they'd have this big like gathering convention every year for about 10 or 15 years, supposedly. And I think it's a true story. John Kay got paid $1 million to perform every year, that one gig. And, you know, obviously Born to Be Wild and Magic Carpet, all that, $1 million every year for like a decade.
That's crazy.
Anyway, John Kay is a really intelligent, smart, you know, go on YouTube, everyone, and watch the interviews with John Kay. An amazing, intellectual in a way, really articulate and really interesting. He has a great solo album on ABC, and I'm blanking on the name, but I have it. The first record with Easy Evil, I think, is the song that got some airplay. Really good record, real amazing record. Anyway, John, thank you for joining in our secondary video, our sophomore video.
Yeah.
I'm not going to belabor the point. Any last words?
Not really.
Okay.
I just hope, I do. I hope that I provided enough information. I've noticed that you have some real class A assholes that watch your channel. They're very, very particular about how they want their music presented by us that make videos, because we're supposed to be experts or some bullshit.
We're not experts.
We're not just talking about our records. We're just talking about our records. So I hope that I did it properly for whoever those people are.
You know,
luckily they don't watch my channel.
Again, when I do these videos, these aren't the best sophomore records. These aren't necessarily my favorites.
No,
these are things I thought of now. There's definitely more famous ones.
Oh my God!
Said, yeah, you know,
I have at least 50 or 60 albums, probably. Like, I have a top 200 list, and I'm gonna eventually do that. I've been talking about it with some people that even make fun of me now because I've talked about it so much with them, not on my.
When your kids go to college, you'll have time.
Well, I want to do it before the end of this year, actually, but it just seems weird. Maybe if we get our way in November, I'll do it as a celebration. But like, there's so many albums on that top 200 list of mine, like of my favorite albums that are sophomore albums, and they're classic albums. Yeah, that's not at all what any of these were that I talked about. but they're great. They're still great. You know, I think they're all great albums.
Well, John, Mazzy loves you.
Yeah.
Mazzy loves all of you.
Yeah.
And thank you all for watching, and write your comments below. I will put a link to the digital gramophone, and I know he gets a little shy about this, but fucking subscribe to this guy, man. And look at as we would say in Woody Allen movies, look at his earlier, funnier videos.
When I stopped being funny.
Don't
pay attention now.
He was so self-deprecating with his subtitles. It was great. That's how I fell in love with John. Yeah. And I thank you all, and you've been a big supporter of my channel. I really appreciate that too. So thank you all, and
of course.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.